I think it's really that I find those characters' motivation a little closer to the real world. I find it next to impossible to write superheroes with any degree of conviction because that I have powers. I will put on a costume, what Warren Ellis memorably called a pervert suit. Um, I find that completely fake because it has no. There is nothing in the real world that has any relation to that. Whereas on the other hand, the notion of vigilantism, the notion of one person setting out for revenge, well, there are countless examples of that throughout history.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the latest edition of Watch Read Listen. I am your host, David Watson. Sitting across from me, as always, is my co-host,
Dwayne Watson.
And we're going to jump into a cool topic this week, which I'm not even going to bother to let you guys get in for the surprise of this. So, but let's start off the week as we always do. Dwayne, what have you been watching, reading, and or listening to?
All right, so the first thing that happened right after our last episode was Jen and I went and saw The Cure at
That's
the
right.
Toyota Center.
Yes. I meant to ask you guys, how was that? Too,
Yeah,
so I'm
it
glad you
was
talked about it.
a combination of good and bad. It was good because The Cure sounded amazing.
Which is why is there a bad then?
Yeah, the bad is it's at the Toyota Center. That's the bad part. So, of course, I will give them credit. Like, I've been to a lot of rock shows over the years, and you kind of deal with some kind of terrible sound sometimes.
Yeah.
I don't remember what the sound was when we went and saw the Deftones in San Antonio.
Deftones in San Antonio was really, really good, but you guys were on the opposite side of the stage from us.
Yeah, I thought the sound was fine.
Where
there,
we were
too.
at, it sounded really good, and that's in San Antonio.
Yeah.
Now, I will say generally at the Toyota Center, I've only had really one good concert experience as far as sound goes, and where you could see.
Yeah.
And that was Nine Inch Nails back in 2000.
Okay, yeah.
So that's a long time ago.
Yeah, we saw Radiohead at the Toyota Center. It wasn't terrible. It was pretty cool. They did some neat video stuff to make it more interesting for people.
I actually looked. Houston Press posted their set list, and I was like, they played a lot of really great songs that I love.
Yeah.
They did "Burn," which actually is my favorite Cure song. That's from the Crow soundtrack.
Yeah, Jen was disappointed because they didn't do. And I don't remember the title of the song, but the one that's "Friday I'm in Love."
That's "Friday I'm in Love."
Okay, I thought so. Because there's a few of them that I'm like not sure, but they did like
I'm surprised they didn't do that one though.
Because she was waiting. They played 3 hours.
Oh yeah, no, it was.
So this was a long show.
The joke I made to Christina when I saw the set list was that I saw the actual set list, and then they showed the encore set list, which is like just as long as a set list.
It was.
And I was like, wow.
3 or 4 encores technically.
But for a band that not a lot of people ever get to see, I think that's pretty. Yeah. That's a pretty rad idea to get to see 3 hours of them.
And so I really did appreciate getting to see them. The only thing that I had, like I said, being in the Toyota Center, we were pretty much as far away from the band as you could possibly be.
Yeah, I saw the
a picture on Facebook.
Yeah.
And at first when we got there, Jen was like, "I think I'm going to need like a seat belt or something because I need to feel like I'm strapped in." And I basically ended up like stuck in the same position for basically 3 hours or 4 hours, and was like, so by the time it was done, I was kind of like, I'm ready to go.
Yeah, you can get pretty uncomfortable too there. That's the other thing too, I think. The last time we were at the Toyota Center, I want to say was when we saw Radiohead.
Yeah.
We had a lot of stuff going on. Me and Christina did.
Right.
So it didn't make it that great, which is a band that I can sit there and say, hey, I've seen Radiohead and I loved seeing Radiohead, but it wasn't under like the greatest of circumstances.
No, and it was kind of the same thing here where it was like, I did appreciate that they did a great job with the sound. It sounded really good. It didn't feel like you were missing something in terms of the sound being way far back. But of course, you can't really see very well. And they did have 2 video screens, but one of the video screens was blocked by speakers. And the cameras were static, so they never moved. So there was one kind of from the floor pointing kind of at an angle up at.
That's strange.
I forget the lead singer guy's name.
Robert Smith.
Yeah, Robert Smith. And then they had another one from the other side of the stage, but they never moved. They did some really cool stuff in the background that was pretty cool. They had some video images, and they had some static images, and they even did one where it was like a delayed video, like a delayed live video feed, so that when things would move, it would do like basically you'd shine one light, and that one light would then become like an infinite number of lights going in the in the background distance.
Yeah.
So there's some stuff like that was really cool. But yeah, the sitting for this figure out, I realized that my feet, I would move my feet and I could feel the seat in front of me, and it wasn't because I was my legs were literally as far back as they could go.
Yeah.
And it would rain that night, and I was holding an umbrella the entire time. So there were some problems with it.
Yeah, no, I understand that. It's funny because I think when we went and saw Batman v Superman, like when I got up from my seat, we had been sitting there the whole time. And what's funny is when we saw Captain America: Civil War, I kept having to chase a 6-year-old who decided he kept having to pee throughout the whole thing.
Right.
And so when I came back, so with BVS, for instance, what made me laugh is that I kept, when I was sitting there the whole time, my legs were completely asleep and my back was completely wet because of those leather seats that I was sitting in. So,
yeah, so it was like the Cure did such a great job. It was a really good show. The conditions in which we saw it weren't the best.
Yeah, Toyota Center's not an ideal place to see bands. That's where a lot of big shows come through too.
Well, and I understand you need the space because in contrast to that show, then we went on Wednesday, which this would be Wednesday the. Oh, now I've forgotten the dates. Sorry. Not that anybody really cares, but it's the Wednesday. It's a week before this show actually airs.
Yeah.
This show comes out on Thursday. It's the week before that Wednesday. Anyways, we went and saw. This was kind of a total fluke thing. I happened to be watching YouTube. 17th, yes. So on May 17th, we saw at a venue we'd never been before. A venue called Super Happy Funland.
Yeah.
It's down on like the. East End. It's south of Moon Tower. Here.
Okay.
So it's. I mean,
this sounds familiar, but I've never been there.
Yeah, actually, on the way to Moon Tower for y'all's wedding, we went down one of the streets nearby here, not realizing that it was over there because we never heard of it before. And it was an interesting venue. Lots of really cool stuff going around. Of course, the problem there is the sound wasn't great because it's a local kind of indie type of club, and they always have problems with feedback really bad.
Yeah.
It's a concrete building, and there's not enough stuff to absorb the sound, even with the people there. And but on the other hand, as far as experiences go, I had a much better time.
Yeah.
So we saw Hank Green and the Perfect Strangers. So Hank Green from the Vlogbrothers. He's the brother of John Green. He does Crash Course. He does SciShow.
Yeah.
So normally he's a YouTube guy, but he's been doing music for a long time. And his musical style is kind of it's got kind of a ska flavor to it. It tends to be really fast.
Okay.
And his band, The Perfect Strangers, for this one is made up of on drums is Rob Scallon, whose YouTube channel we follow, and he does a lot of real cool stuff on guitar usually.
Yeah.
And then on guitar he had, so this is kind of the funny thing about it, on guitar he had Andrew Huang, and his channel he's a guy who does, like, he makes music out of anything. So people will be like, hey, make a song out of using a balloon, and so then he records a bunch of samples of different things he can do with that balloon, and then makes an entire song out of it.
So this is a bunch of YouTube guys get together and they do like
and
a
then
band thing.
On bass and
kind of cool though.
Keyboard and slash saxophone was the guys from Harry and the Potters, which
I've heard of them. Yeah.
So that's who was that was the headliner band, and then who we really were there to see. The kind of a combination here was Driftless Pony Club, and Driftless Pony Club is the band of Craig Benzine, who's otherwise known as Wheezy Waiter. And Craig, he also does host for Mental Floss and also for Crash Course. And we started following him as Wheezy Waiter, but actually he's been doing this. The band has actually been around since 2004, so it's not like he just started this band after doing YouTube stuff. He's actually that was kind of his primary thing, and the Wheezy Waiter thing became bigger than the band. But I will say they're really cool, just indie, like 90s indie rock kind of style to it, which I kind of dig. And
there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, it actually sounds pretty cool.
And then we saw Harry and the Potters, and the joke with them is that they are both Harry Potter, like the two guys, and then the drummer is they called him Cedric Diggory, but that's kind of the joke, and so they're like, we grew up. So they always use the pronoun we, but then, I'm Harry Potter and I'm Harry Potter and we are Harry and the Potters. But they were really good. That's the cool thing about it is musically they're cool.
There's a documentary about like Harry Potter fandom, I think, and I think they're on there.
Oh, I would expect so.
And I actually thought they were really good too. So I've heard like snippets of their stuff before. But.
And then of course Andrew Huang and Rob Scallon did solo stuff, a few songs each, and it's just really cool to see them there. If you go and you watch the latest Vlogbrothers video for Friday, May 20th, you can't really see us, but we are in the crowd on the screen in Houston saying, "Hi, John, it's Friday." Or "Good morning, John, it's Friday."
That's pretty rad.
So we're actually in the video. You can't really see us because the quality's not good enough to pick out faces from where we're standing. But anyways, it was pretty cool. And,
that is really rad, though.
Yeah, it was a good show.
Yeah.
Cool venue. Something I hadn't thought about before.
Yeah.
My last thing is the latest episode of The Canon. And I feel like I keep mentioning this, like, let's talk about This Week in the Canon. Maybe we just call our...
I always wanted like if I thought he would like listen to something, but it's like we mentioned Devin Faraci on almost every episode.
Yes,
because he's a writer that I admire. When I sit down, I try to when I watch a movie or when I approach like critical thinking, he's become somebody that I have a lot of admiration for.
Yes,
so much to the point where Christina gets annoyed when I mention him. So she's like, "Your man crush that you have on Devin Faraci." I was like, "Well, this is true.
Yeah.
I think he's a really funny dude. Yeah. I think he brings up I think he has a really good especially for the modern day. He brings something that's like almost old school." Like Pauline Kael used to bring to criticism and brings that into kind of a modern day spiel. I think he really tries to look at films on their merit, and he does bring his own bias into this stuff. We've talked about that before. So he acknowledges that too.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, like, yeah. Devin Faraci gets to mention almost on every episode, seems like. Of late.
Yeah, and the reason that this one in particular is not just because it was Seven, and I like the movie Seven.
Yes.
But it's because of the discussion that they had between Devin Faraci and Amy Nicholson about why Seven is important. And
that was one of the most oddball conversations I've ever heard.
And if you need to go look, if you haven't listened to it, go listen to it because it's really. I mean, if you can not get frustrated with the fact that they're kind of disagreeing and they're also like talking past each other to a certain extent, because Devin Faraci's point is that you can't keep looking back to the director to tell you what you should be thinking about this. And Amy Nicholson keeps bringing up, she's like, well, I don't think the director meant anything by including this. And the problem, of course, with that is
Fincher gets that a lot. Though,
is I think that you have to. And I'm a big fan personally of the critical theory that says the author is dead, and you can't keep going back and saying, "Explain this to me. Why did you do this?"
I can bring this into like a personal turnaround in terms of the podcast goes. Like I made a comment on the forums because I did vote yes for Seven to be in the canon, but I even made the comment that I want to say that Somerset is reading through the whole thing came down to like pill bottles in a drawer,
right? And
which is Amy Nicholson has this really bad thing where like Devin calls it the yellow scarf, where she gets hung up on the meaning of something that maybe doesn't have meaning to it,
right?
So it's really funny because that whole discussion like went going on, but I even made the comment in the forums where I said, well, Somerset's reading out of John Doe's journals, and he even makes a thing about how his head started like hurting because he was having a mundane conversation with somebody on the subway,
right? And
then he threw up because of it, and he didn't really realize he had thrown up on the man, and he started laughing because of it.
Yeah,
and I made that comment in the forums, but then my defense of Seven as well is the fact that like Alien, which is also in the canon, it's the screenplay is written. It's a B movie that's elevated by the director.
Yes.
So the director takes the material serious enough that he is elevating what is essentially B movie material.
Right.
And if you actually listen to the commentaries and stuff, Andrew Kevin Walker, the writer of Seven, even acknowledges that Seven is a B movie. It is it's Seven Deadly Sins. It's like, if you were to make that, like if Roger Corman or some production company were to make that, it'd probably be a little bit more schlocky.
Right.
And David Fincher, being sort of the artistic stylist that he is, elevates that material out of that. So I didn't really buy some of the arguments that I was hearing against Seven.
Yeah, I didn't. And the fact that, for example, that, thinking of, do these aspirin bottles mean anything? And being annoyed at the fact that you don't think they mean anything.
I think it's implied meaning, though.
And it's like, even if you don't think it means something, that's fine. But even the director may not 100% know why, but it doesn't mean it doesn't have meaning.
Yeah.
And I think that there's something to be said there, and for the fact that we are making meaning out of what we read and watch and listen to.
Yeah.
In addition to the actual creator.
Well, I have to say, too, I appreciated the whole death of the author thing. Devin kind of brings that up and says that you can't, you have to sit there and you've talked about it in private, and we haven't really brought it up. We brought it up to a degree on the show.
Yeah,
the idea of that you can't from a critical angle, you can't look at things as like what you think the author meant necessarily.
Right.
That's not a fair approach to criticism.
Because most of the time you don't actually know. And even when you do know, that doesn't
You're making
matter.
an assumption.
Yeah.
But that's not a bad thing either, though. If you're approaching something critically and you're making an assumption, it's good if you make some assumption, but you can't automatically dismiss it as empty substance because you don't know.
No, you don't know. And if somebody else sees something important in there and you don't, that's fine. And I think it becomes a question of, well, I don't like it, and that's fine.
Oh, yeah.
But you can't. It's hard to argue why it shouldn't be important. I have the same problem. For example, with somebody like Beyonce in music. It's like I hear it and people keep going on and on about, like, have you seen Lemonade? It's amazing. And I'm like, I don't care.
Now, I will say...
Maybe it is amazing.
Now, I had no interest in seeing Lemonade.
Yeah.
And then Amy, on the Canon episode, actually mentions the fact that it was directed by Mark Romanek.
Right.
So now I actually have some interest in seeing it because I like Mark Romanek.
Sure.
Mark Romanek directed... one of my favorite music videos, actually a ton of my favorite music videos, not just this one, but the one that I can see off the top of the bat is the Nine Inch Nails song Closer. He directed the video for that. And he's got a really, he's one of those directors that it's sad that he hasn't had a directing career outside of music videos, because he's got a very unique approach to directing that's purely him. Mm-hmm. He did direct the Robin Williams film 1 Hour Photo.
Oh yeah,
which I'm a huge fan of. I saw that in theaters. Yeah, I loved that movie, and we actually I have it on DVD. It's one of those movies that me and Christina have talked about a lot because we both really dig it. And so now I might actually watch the Beyonce video for Lemonade just because of the director.
Sure. But
I have no interest in her. I think Beyonce's overrated myself. There's something appealing about her.
And I guess
stuff.
part of me feels like...
But I can't... Even Devin makes the argument against the term overrated, which I have to agree with as well.
Right.
It's just not my bag. Maybe it's not overrated, it's just not my bag.
And that's really what I mean. Like for example, the fact that I don't like Beyonce, and when people say, oh, she's amazing, and I'm like, that's why she feels overrated to me. It's because I don't get it.
It's just not my thing.
Yeah, and I realize it's not my thing. It's not going to be my thing.
I literally think every song that she does sounds the same to me. Like I don't hear any diversity in there.
Sure,
but you can make the same argument because I listen to punk.
Yeah,
I have no.
I listen to metalcore. It's like everything's the same.
There's not a lot of diversity.
Here comes the breakdown, and that's how it works. So that's my my this week, and we'll have links to a bunch of this stuff in the show notes too.
I'm actually kind of proud. Like I actually made some time, and this is all so I can kind of break the fourth wall. Sometimes I'll do stuff because I work all week.
Right.
So I work Monday through Friday. On a Friday, I'll kind of cram a bunch of stuff in.
Yeah.
Do I have something to talk about? And that doesn't always happen, as you can hear through past episodes. So this weekend, starting Friday, so I finally watched... it was a movie directed by Richard Harmon. Came out in 1986. A little movie called The Hitcher.
Oh, yeah.
With C. Thomas Howell and Rutger Hauer.
Yeah.
I mean, I loved it. I was actually really blown away by this movie. Something that's really fascinating too is that John Seale was the DP on it. John Seale also directed one of my favorite movies he didn't direct. He was a DP on one of our favorite movies of last year, Mad Max Fury Road.
Oh, cool.
So this is actually one of his first kind of Hollywood movies that he did. He wasn't really well known at the point that he did The Hitcher. Rutger Hauer is hypnotically dangerous in this film. It makes you it throws you back to a time when he was a dangerous person when you saw him on screen.
Yeah.
So you take that to like Blade Runner, how he plays Roy Batty. Like it's the same thing. It's he imbues the dangerousness of that character. But there's almost a I don't want to say beauty. There's almost a beauty to his face.
Yeah.
Back then, because he was still younger enough that there was something very hypnotic and very dangerous about the way he looked.
Yeah.
When he would look at you, you were like, holy crap. And he does that a few times in The Hitcher where you're like, holy crap, because there's a smile on his face when he's like threatening C. Thomas Howell in certain ways.
Yeah.
And what led to it was I had listened to a Projection Booth podcast episode on The Hitcher, and I was finally like, okay, I'm going to sit down. I'm going to watch this finally.
Okay, cool.
It's a movie that I've actually seen the remake of The Hitcher with Sean Bean, which is terrible. Like, it's not memorable whatsoever.
Yeah, I forgot that was
I saw the remake, and I had not seen the original.
Yeah.
The original is amazing. It's quick. It's fast-paced. It does this thing that I have a tremendous amount of respect for horror movies that sometimes do this. It depends on the story. But when a horror movie pretty much gives you its premise right from the start.
Yeah.
So you see Thomas Howell during the credits. He's smoking a cigarette. He's driving this car. Right after the credits are done, he picks up Rutger Hauer, and the threats start from the beginning.
It doesn't take 30 minutes of setup.
So you know what you're in for the minute like this movie starts. So it moves very, very briskly.
Yeah.
So, I watched The Hitcher.
Cool.
And then I watched the 1978 Brian De Palma movie, The Fury, which stars Kirk Douglas, John Cassavetes, and Amy Irving. Amy Irving, many people know she was the main character in Carrie. That's not Carrie, which Brian De Palma also directed.
Yes.
This is an interesting movie, not what I expected. It's a supernatural horror movie dealing with psychics. This is a movie that's similar to Scanners.
Okay.
David Cronenberg's Scanners, but before Scanners came out.
Oh, cool.
Very interesting. And it follows the same vein in that it lets you know kind of the supernatural psychic angle like right up front. It's very interesting. There's a conversation between Kirk Douglas and his son. His son is kidnapped, and the whole mission is that John Cassavetes' character was a partner of Kirk Douglas's character, and he's kidnapped his son and tried to kill Kirk Douglas's character. So the whole point of The Fury is he's trying to find his son.
Yeah.
And it's a really fascinating point. His son has been abducted because of his strong psychic powers. So they tell you all this up at the beginning.
Right.
So you know that they've done this for a tool. It's how the story progresses and what happens at the end that makes it really fascinating.
Cool.
It's got a lot of the great like stalwarts of De Palma's stuff. I've been on a De Palma kick this year to where I finally, for a guy who's only watched Scarface and Carrie, going back through his back catalog so far this year, I've seen Blowout, which has become one of my favorite movies of all time. Phantom of the Paradise, which was amazing. I wrote a great review of it up on the site, and now The Fury. So it's like I've got a couple more films that I'm really interested in seeing of his from that 70s, 80s period. Because I think the next one that I'm going to try to watch is going to be Dressed to Kill. I just didn't have the time to do it today.
Okay, cool.
So. And then, really quickly, Frank Carter and the Rattlesnakes, I talked about them on our top 10 of the year list from last year, released it's a quick 10-minute video. It's called The Year of the Snake. They kind of talk about the past year and the current, like what their plans are for the future with the band. And that's really fascinating. So I'll give it a quick shout out. Yeah. I haven't read them yet, but Christina did pick up from the comic book store the last issues 3 and 4 of The Dark Knight 3: The Master Race. I kind of flipped through them. It looks really fascinating. I think this story is better than people are giving it credit for. But I think at some point we'll talk about Frank Miller and The Dark Knight, and at some point on a full-ish episode.
Yeah,
so I won't go into the deepness of it. And then last but not least, music-wise, actually I was able to pull a trifecta or a hat trick, as they call it, a threefer, where I have a watch, a read, and a listen. And that's I've been getting into this power. They're called a power violence / hardcore / punk band called Nails. I listened to their 2 albums, which oddly enough clock in at just a little bit over 30 minutes for 2 records. One's called Abandon All Life. The other's called Silent Death. They're a very quick, like, metal trio, and I've heard about them a lot. Actually, it's because Bill by Force on Outside the Cinema, he actually has worn a Nails hoodie before. So I was like, I'm going to try them out. They're just it's quick, angry... minute and a half music per song. Yeah. So they blaze through it. If you're interested in something heavy and kind of brutal like that, that's it. So cool. Before we go to the break, what we're going to talk about today is after all the superhero Marvel talk that we've done for the past few weeks, me and Dwayne decided to talk about just comic books, but we decided to delve into non-superhero comic books. Right. And we've kind of framed it in a 5 to 1 what we think is like some of the best like non-superhero comic books that are out there, because I think it's a discussion that gets brought up, but it doesn't get brought up enough. So we're going to take a break, and then we'll come right back and we'll jump into that. Hey guys, this is David from the Watch, Read, Listen podcast. We've been talking about it for a few months, and now we're going to be doing, hopefully here on June 5th, we're going to be launching our newest podcast known as
All Booked Up.
And this is going to be hosted by my lovely wife,
Shoo!
You guys know her. She's been a guest on numerous episodes. How about you tell the guests what they're going to be expecting from the show?
Hey, you should expect to read a book each month with me and everyone else. I will be giving away a book every month. The book that we read will be given away. We will also be discussing this with different characters along the way, different people. And we're going to have a lot of fun. This is for all you people that don't want to go join an actual book club like me in person. So let's have fun. Let's read.
So as always, show you guys your support. She is on Twitter at ABU_podcast. You can find her on Facebook as All Booked Up Podcast on Facebook. And hey, just like we always ask you guys, show some support, and we'll see you guys there. All right, and we're back. We're going to take this in a 5 to 1. We're going to go from our number 5 to 1. But before that, Dwayne and I talked about we're going to do honorable mentions real quick, because there's a ton of honorable mentions that I think if we didn't at least name check them, people would be upset about. So what are your honorable mentions, if you have any?
So my honorable mentions, I kind of divided them into 2 little categories, even though they're not very long. The first one is Mouse by Art Spiegelman, and I love this book.
I've actually never read that, so
I've got it. I've got the it's a 2-volume collection, and of course it's one of the more famous graphic novels.
Oh
won the Pulitzer Prize, it says here, in 1992, and people who don't read comic books know about Mouse and all of that. So I wanted to mention that one because I think it's really really great work.
Right.
And then I have on the non the non-manga side, I should say, is what I have, is the way I divide this up. And that's the Max by Sam Keith.
Yes.
Alan Moore and Bill Messner-Loebs, right?
Bill Messner-Loebs, yes. That's on my honorable mentions as well. So.
Yeah, the Max is actually one of my favorite ones, and it almost made the list.
Yeah.
And I decided not to put it on there, mainly because it's pretty well known, and I would almost want to do like a whole, maybe even a whole episode on the Max.
I think it would be worth doing a whole episode on the Max, because, like, I'm the same way. The Max barely eked out, and I mean barely eked out on my list, and so, it almost made it on there. And then on the manga side, I have a few that I thought, I wanted to go ahead and throw these out there as something that's a little different. The first one is a manga by
there's a manga called Azumanga Daioh. It's also an anime, and it's really funny, and it's about high school girls, and it's just strange and weird, and just kind of funny and low key, and it's one of those things you can watch or read when you're like stressed out. And the creator of Azumanga Daioh has another series called Yotsuba and it's about a like 5 or 6 or 7 year old little girl and her dad and the people in their neighborhood. And it's funny, and she does cute kid things, and that's about it. So it's not really deep. I've got two volumes of it, and so I haven't read a whole lot of it, so I just wanted to put it on the honorable mention list of things. Then I have Genshiken, which is speaking about fanboys and nerds and all that sort of stuff like we have. That's basically like a manga about manga and anime and video game nerds in Japan. And it's more realistic. Like they're not trying to there's no magical stuff in it whatsoever. There is a show that they really all like, and the show is kind of like it is a magical show, but it's not real. It's actually like an actual show in the manga and then the anime. Another one on the same kind of list of things is called Welcome to the NHK. Yeah. And it's about, there's a trend in Japan of people that they call hikikomori, who are people who are basically shut-ins, but they're shut-ins of a particular age. They're usually either late or post-college, and basically they kind of freak out and don't go outside ever. And anyways, it's about one of those guys and what happens to him. And then one of the ones that is out on the supernatural side is called Kurosagi Corpse Delivery Service. And this one was another one. Those was almost made it on my list.
Interesting.
It is about a group of students at a Buddhist college, because that's actually a thing in Japan. And it's about basically these guys they form a service to find dead bodies, and then basically the idea is to tell people how the person died. Okay. And to get closure for the family, and they're trying to make money on it, but they're kind of terrible at making money at it. But it starts off as kind of like just a thing to do, and then they actually take it, becomes a serious sort of thing. And it's actually really the artwork in it is just really. It is manga, but it's not like standard. It's not going to be like your Dragon Ball Zs or your Sailor Moons or something like that. It's more realistic, and it's got some really strange sorts of things. As I'm going through here, there's a girl with her arms and legs cut off. So, anyways, it's kind of more on the on the grisly side of things, but it's really good. And unfortunately, I think Dark Horse only ever printed, I want to say 6 volumes of it, and I've got the first 5. So I need to find the last one that they printed, but I think there's more of it, but they never finished translating it.
I thought about this before we recorded too.
Yeah.
And I don't think we've ever pointed this out, that I'm actually, it's interesting the divide that me and you have as far as fans go, because I don't really particularly care for manga or anime.
Yes.
And I mean, you could glean that if you've listened to past episodes. I've always thought that I go, as far as like film goes, or movies or whatever, or shows, I go more on the horror side of things, and you go more towards you like anime. I'm talking about genre specific, which horror encompasses a lot of different things.
Yeah, horror genre, just manga and anime are mediums.
Yeah, but, and it's just been one of those things that I've just never gotten into it.
And I get that. I guess my part of my thing is coming from our last episode on fanboys. Is I'm like, let's be more inclusive, and I'm just going to call it. This is our episode on comic books, and these are.
I sincerely don't have anything until unless you mentioned Scott Pilgrim, which you did, which I think is more closer to manga than it is anything else.
Just because it was published like a manga.
Like manga, yeah. And
but we'll talk more about Scott Pilgrim later.
Yeah, that's the closest I get. I don't really like anything else. I'm just kind of like,
Yeah, and I get it.
It's actually an art style more than it is anything else. And I've talked about that to a degree on the last episode too.
Yeah,
so.
And sometimes it's just a matter of finding the thing that you like, and once you find the thing that you like, then you're like, oh, that's amazing. And
there was one that I know that you it used to be in Tokyo Pop. I don't remember the.
Actually, I was going to mention. I just thought about that. Parasite.
Parasite
is amazing.
Yes, and I will say, as far as somebody who doesn't necessarily like manga. I remember Parasite being something that I really
Parasite
dug.
is alien,
very disturbing
sci-fi horror.
Yes, which is probably why I like it. So
yeah, and there is a really good anime adaptation of that just came out like a couple of years ago.
I remember that's what made me think about it, because I heard somebody talk about it.
So I should have put that on my list as well. But Parasite is really cool, and I had it back in the Mixzine Tokyo Pop days of things. So that's my honorable mentions. Everything else is on my list. So
yeah, I mean, my quick, I had the Max on mine as well. I do have to. I have to point out The Walking Dead by Robert Kirkman, Tony Moore, and Charlie Adler. What's interesting about The Walking Dead for me is that, and I'll talk about it when we get to. There's a book on my list that has this particular artist on there. I nothing against Charlie Adler. I've read over 100 issues of The Walking Dead.
yeah.
And I don't have an issue with Charlie Adler's art. The problem is that the first 6 issues of The Walking Dead are done by an artist that I have a tremendous amount of. He's probably one of my favorite comic book artists with Tony Moore.
Yeah.
There's a style that he has that I just like. It threw me off the first time I ever read The Walking Dead was getting thrown off from issue 6 to issue 7.
Yeah.
When that art style changes from Tony Moore to Charlie Adler, and so, but that I had to throw The Walking Dead on there because it is something that I've enjoyed, at least 100 plus issues of it.
Yeah.
So, I also have 100 Bullets by Brian Azzarello and Edward Risso, which was published by Vertigo. It's a 100 issue comic book series. It's called 100 Bullets. So
there you go.
Consistent throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
It does kind of flounder towards the end if I had to critique it, but I really enjoy it overall.
Yeah.
There's a particular, I can't remember what book it is, but there's one of the books towards the middle of the series. It's one of the longer ones. It's called I think it's called Wiley Gets the Blues, and it focuses on a character whose name is Wiley, obviously, and he it really kind of has a good emotional center to it, and it's really to me it's Brian Azzarello and Eduardo Rizzo firing on all cylinders as far as the book itself goes.
Yeah.
Also, Black Science by Rick Remender and Matteo Scalera. This is a more recent book. I read the first 6 issues of it. They do have it out on trade. And, it's one of those things where they're going to be doing it like intermittently. So they're releasing like volumes at a time kind of thing. So they'll do a 6-issue burst and then they'll do another 6-issue burst. Really interesting kind of style. Sci-fi. It deals with like trans-dimensional kind of stuff is all I can put it. Where basically this scientist, they have a broken contraption that allows them to go from different dimensions. Okay. And they're cool. And the battles of trying to get through those different dimensions and what's going on with those. Then I did have to throw on Sin City by Frank Miller. I've read pretty much every volume of Sin City except for Hell and Back. Right. I've loved every single one of them. I'm a big proponent of Frank Miller. I get a lot of. He'd be an interesting topic of conversation if we talked about separating the art from the artist. Sure. Conversation, because he does have some. He's kind of gotten crazier in his old age, but I tend to be a defender of him as well. Yeah. Because I think that he's still, for a dude who's older in his age and has gone through a lot, probably within the last 5 years. Yeah. He's still doing what he can as far as comic work goes, and I think people dismiss him because they don't necessarily agree with him on his political beliefs, and I don't think that's necessarily fair. No, but I also threw in Ronin as well. It's been a while since I've read Ronin. Ronin was Frank Miller's transitional period. He'd just finished with Daredevil. Yeah, he hadn't really done any work for DC yet. He hadn't done the Batman, the Dark Knight Returns stuff, and he actually kind of did a different art style that was more influenced by like Mobius and the French movements, with a little bit of that manga influence as well. So he was trying to transition in sort of the way he drew at that time. It wasn't as influenced by the Jack Kirby aesthetic of the 70s that a lot of people were influenced by. And then last but not least, From Hell by Alan Moore and Eddie Campbell. That definitely had to make that's another one like the Max that barely didn't get into the top 5 because this is a work that it's almost deserving of an episode in and of itself because of how deep the work is. It's one of those works that you can read it and what's even What's even better about the work in and of itself is that Alan Moore, in the published volumes, has his appendices in which he talks about all of the research that he did in making this book, and it makes it richer and fuller, and it really gives you an idea of the amount of historical proof and data that he was really going off of. The story and plot in and of itself are his quote unquote invention, not necessarily his invention, but they are it's based off of the idea that Jack the Ripper was Sir William Gull, which is a long-standing theory,
right?
But it's him taking that notion, that theory, and putting it into a historical context and using history itself to kind of tell this story about the birth of the 20th century. Which is strange to sit there and really think about, but that's
that's pretty cool. Which actually, I mean, this is completely off topic, but that reminded me that I think isn't there a new version of Time After Time, H.G. Wells' Jack the Ripper. Was a movie of that, or a series or something.
Yes,
coming out.
I've heard rumors of it. I've never actually ever seen the original movie, but
I haven't either. But I just, as I think about that, I was like, oh yeah, there was that thing.
Wasn't Time After Time? Is that I want to say that was directed by the guy who directed Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, Nicholas Meyer.
Okay.
And I think Christopher Reeve is in it, and I want to say David Warner is in it.
Sounds right to me.
In the original version of it. Yeah. That'd be a cool thing to redo. I think it's a ripe story, because I think it involves H.G. Wells. Yeah, H.G. Wells and Jack the Ripper with the time machine, which is a fairly fascinating thing to kind of go with. Yeah. So, but yeah, From Hell is a deep dive. It's even more interesting if you pair it with the movie,
right?
Because the movie plays it off like a mystery. You're not supposed to know who Jack the Ripper is,
right?
The great thing about the graphic novel is that you know who he is right off the bat. It is literally his story, that you're following, which would probably not be as interesting as a movie, but I think it's a fascinating concept.
Yeah, and that may be something we'll have to compare later on.
Yeah, and I don't know if you have it in your top 5, but honorable mentions, and we just talked about this, was I had to throw in V for Vendetta as well, because it's not.
No, it's not on my my top 5 either. I haven't finished it, so.
One of my favorite, and that would be a future a future episode as well, because. In talking about fanboys, that was kind of funny is that in adaptations of material, it's one of those fascinating things where I'm a huge fan of the book, and I have issues with the adaptation, the film adaptation.
Right.
But it's more of it's stuff that I can get over to a degree.
Sure.
But it kind of there's a difference in the works. There's an anarchy versus liberal context going on in both works. So
cool.
All right, so what's your number 5?
All right, so like I said before, I wanted to kind of include something a little different that I knew for sure wouldn't be on your list, because it's a manga, and that is Gunsmith Cats. So, Gunsmith Cats is a manga by Kenichi Sonata. It's ran from 1991 to 1997. So there's a trend in all my works in that they all started in the 90s and pretty much were contained to the 90s, so you can kind of tell what was kind of formative to me. I included Gunsmith Cats on here because it's, number one, it's completely devoid. It's not a superhero thing. It's not a mecha thing. It's not magical in any sort of way. It's basically a 80s or late 80s, early 90s crime movie in comic form. It's about two. The Gunsmith Cats are both a gun shop and bounty hunters, and it's kind of weird because they're like the lead bounty hunter is 19 years old, which just completely doesn't make any sense at all for this girl to be 19 years old. She should be at least in her 20s and maybe even in her 30s. But she's basically there's an expert marksman named Riley Vincent, and her partner is Minnie Mae Hopkins, who is an explosives expert, and it's basically they take jobs, they get involved with the jobs, things usually go wrong, They have to get out of the job or figure it out or whatever. There are some recurring characters. There's a couple of villains that recur. There's a guy named Bean Bandit who is kind of like, sometimes he's their ally and sometimes he's their enemy. But it's really about like guns and cars. It takes place in a fictional Chicago. It's completely fictional though, because I don't think when he started or when he wrote it, I don't think Kenichi Sonoda had ever been to Chicago.
Okay.
Like, he's basing it off of like movies and things like that.
Which is a fascinating approach.
yeah,
I think it's kind of an
and
interesting one.
I would argue that this is one of those works that's probably significantly different than most of the other things we've mentioned so far, in the fact that I don't think it's particularly deep.
Yeah.
It's just fun. What really attracted me to it, and I started reading this. You can, if you look at my little tiny bit of collection that I have, because I bought it when I didn't have any money to spend on comic books, so it's all real spotty. I started buying it back when Dark Horse it was published by Dark Horse in the United States, and they were still publishing the like comic book style comic books.
Yeah.
So this is before the manga boom of the early 2000s, when they started producing what they call, in Japan they call these tankobon, the collected editions of the book.
Yeah.
And
they're like mini digest versions, basically.
So my collection is real spotty. I've read a lot of it digitally. And then they started publishing a revised, redone edition, and it's just like really fast action, crime.
Yeah,
I like the artwork. That's part of it.
Oh, I've looked through it before. It's actually Guns with the Gas isn't. It's just not my bag, but
It's got cute girls with short hair. I mean, it's like, that's what it is.
Yeah.
So Gunsmith Cats. A couple of other things about it. There is an OAV. Actually, the OAV that it was based on was called Bean Bandit. It's only 45 minutes long. It's real short, but it's basically, again, a crime action 80s movie,
right?
But just animated.
Yeah.
And then he based that idea off of took that idea and then expanded it out to Gunsmith Cats. It was actually nominated for a Harvey Award in 1997 for
that doesn't surprise me.
Best American Adaptation of Foreign Material.
Okay.
And like I said, I love it's really kinetic, and it really fits into that kind of 80s, 90s aesthetic of, what's going on is crazy, but you buy it. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, every gun has like infinite amount of bullets, and the action that people do is crazy and doesn't make any sense. The villains are over the top. It's really cool. So that's why I put it on my list as number 5.
My number 5 I put on here because it's still ongoing, and it's still it's actually one of my favorite books, but I put it at number 5 because it's still being published. So, there's not, eventually I think it is a finite run. It is not a series that will continue to go on. And that is, John Layman and Rob Guillory's Chew. That is CHEW. This follows an FDA agent named Tony Chu,
yes,
CHU, who is what is known as a Sebopath, and basically he can eat anything, and kind of get a psychic impression of what that thing came from or what's gone on in the past.
Yeah,
he can basically see past events. So say if he eats a cow, he knows where that cow came from.
Okay, wow.
And like what it went through when it was slaughtered.
Mm-hmm.
So much to the point where he's decided like all Tony Chu's diet consists of is beets, because it's the only thing he can't get a reading off of. It's really funny. He ends up in the first graphic novel partnering with a fellow Sebopath named Savoy Mason, who kind of shows him the ropes, and it's about kind of their whole struggle. He originally started off with another partner. It starts off with basically Tony eats a ladle of soup and figures out that this cook, this is all in the first issue, and that this cook is a serial killer. Because a drop of the cook's blood drops into the soup. Right. Tony eats the soup, and then he figures that out. And his partner is debilitated, but comes back as a cyborg.
Oh, fun!
So it's very quirky. It's very funny. I don't want to give anything too much away, Christina will probably like get mad at me for not saying too much about it, but it's one of those books that I think you have to experience it. It's funny, it's got heartfelt moments to it as well.
Yeah,
which is kind of a running theme through I think the majority of the books that are in my list are books that are both entertaining, funny, maybe mildly disgusting, and but have those moments like where they've built the characters.
Sure.
And that's the thing I think with a comic book that you really have to do is you have to have endearing characters.
Yeah.
You have to give a crap about these people, and if you do, it makes the funny moments funnier. But it makes the lows hit you a little bit better.
Yeah.
And that's just good craftsmanship as well. So, like Chew to me is really about that. It's two artists working in tangent. You'll notice this too is that a lot of the books on my list are a writer-artist pair.
Yeah,
there's not a book that and I think that's true for indie comic books as well. That I think people need to realize is that generally they are singular works of a writer-artist.
Yeah.
Either a combo or a single person.
Yeah, all mine are single people.
So all mine are like writer-artist combos. A team of a group of people who are focused on what the story that they're telling, and that really comes apart. It really comes to age because they're firing on all cylinders.
Yeah,
and Chew, which is still ongoing. That's why the only reason it makes it at number 5 is because it's still ongoing. So like we don't know how it ends. But it's excellent. If you get a chance, go pick it up. You can get it in a couple of different ways. You can get it in trades, very cheap trades from Image Comics.
Cool.
It's published by Image. You can get it for like $9.99 a piece for trades. They even have some cool hardback. They're called Omnivore editions, which plays very much into the whole idea of that's expanded upon.
Yeah,
where people are able to eat things and they have different powers that are associated with eating things.
Yeah.
So they have Omnivore editions, which you can pick up, which are a little bit more expensive, but they're usually like 20 issues a piece.
Yeah.
So they're kind of worth it because at this run, we're getting close to, or maybe 10 to 12 issues a piece. I think they're on about issue 54 or 55.
Yeah.
They took a little bit of a break because John Layman actually was writing Detective Comics during the New 52 for a little bit. So they took a little bit of a break. And then, it's funny. It's a great book. I think Christina Shu has talked about she's contemplating doing the first volume of Chew for the All Booked Up podcast at some point.
Awesome.
Because I think she thinks a lot of people would get a lot of enjoyment out of it.
Yeah,
and they really would. It's fun. It's a lot of fun.
Cool. All right, my number 4 is something that I think nowadays, most people know this from the movie, but it's Scott Pilgrim. By Brian Lee O'Malley. This is published from 2004 to 2010. So actually, that's my one that's not from the 90s. As I'm looking at the list here, I first heard about Scott Pilgrim well before the movie from the Geek Nights podcast.
I knew it because of the movie. That's all.
Yeah, they were talking about it back then, and I was like, "Oh, that sounds cool." The funny thing about things like a book like Scott Pilgrim, when they first mentioned it, like they didn't go into any depth about it. So in my head, I thought it was like, with a name like Scott Pilgrim, in my head I'm imagining something like Solomon Kane, about some warrior guy who is, a wanderer and has to go through the world and defeat
I never made
monsters
that connection,
and stuff.
but that's a good point. I never thought about it that way.
I don't know what it is, but in my head, that's when I first heard about it, that's what I thought it was. And of course, then I pick it up, and I'm like, this doesn't look like that at all. The first issue, or volume, this was published in 6 volumes, about one a year. It's called Scott Pilgrim's Precious Little Life. And something about the artwork in here, Brian Lee O'Malley does have what I would call like almost like a manga sensibility, but it's definitely not. It's not manga, obviously. It's Canadian.
I think it goes. It actually has
like a comic, like a cartoon.
Yeah, it's got that weird. I think it's a weird mishmash of some manga sensibilities, a little bit of comic sensibilities, and even like some cartooning, like comic strip sensibilities.
Yes, that's what I was
saying,
cartooning. And we talked about that a little bit with last week, and we're going to talk more about it later. Because actually, now that I think about it, these top 4 people, they're basically cartoonists. And one thing about Scott Pilgrim, the movie really did overshadow a lot. But basically, what they did with the movie is they took all 6 of these and they condensed the whole storyline really, really drastically. And I enjoy the movie. It's one of those things that I like watching. But I get where people are like they don't like Scott Pilgrim as a character, and they don't think his character arc is earned, as we've talked about before. This idea of earning your character arcs. The book is different because it's longer. It takes a little bit more time. Ramona Flowers, for example, is way more fleshed out as a character. I know one of the things that Jen has criticized the movie for is she doesn't get why Ramona Flowers is such a big deal.
Right.
Like
that's a fair criticism.
Yeah, she's like,
I love that movie, but
she's like Kim Pine is really like Kim Pine is awesome.
Yeah.
And she's like, why isn't Scott with Kim Pine? Like, what's up with that? And of course, if you learn the backstory of Scott and Kim and how that whole thing worked out, there's some things that happen with Stephen Stills. He has some character moments in it. I'm sorry?
The talent.
Yes, the talent. There's some differences, and I found myself really, not relating directly to it because I didn't live my life on the same progression as Scott Pilgrim, but I get
Nor do we ever live in Canada.
No. Although every time I see like the pictures of snowing and things like that, I'm always like, oh, why don't I live in Canada? And it's because I married somebody who gets cold really easily. So
same here.
But I just this book I really like. I connected emotionally with it, which is again when people watch the movie, I get why they criticize it and be like, how can people like this? It's just style over substance. It's flashy. It's this, that, and the other thing. And I'm like, well, maybe, but read the comic. The comic is so much deeper. I really enjoy it a lot. I think it's a good one. And actually, there's I love the way that music plays a part in the book. And
I would always say that. As far as recommendations go, I really love the movie. I got a lot of it because I didn't know anything about Scott Pilgrim. I think I rented it purely based on the idea that it's an Edgar Wright movie.
Which is a good enough reason, to be honest.
And as a fan of his, so I think I've never disliked a movie of his.
Yeah.
Which he's only had 4, so...
and there's whole scenes here. Like, check out how like direct this is from the movie. You recognize that scene?
Yeah, I've read the graphic novels, or the trades that have come out, and I remember me and Christina talking about like we really like. I think it adds if you have only ever approached it from the movie and you liked the movie and then you read the trades that they're very. It fleshes things out for you.
Yes, I think
in a positive way.
That's a big part of it. Is you really do get a feeling for the characters.
But I get the criticism though. I actually have to agree with Jen. I think I had thought about that, but yeah, Ramona, you don't get why she's such a big deal if you haven't. No. She is not fleshed out as much as she is in the books.
And I completely get the idea of being infatuated with somebody and then finding out that they're not a big deal. Like that's a realistic thing. So I'm cool with that idea in the movie. It doesn't bother me, but. I just really like the book, and so I would suggest that. So,
my number 4 is Transmetropolitan by Warren Ellis and Derek Robertson. It's published by Vertigo DC. Also, originally, the first few issues were published by a DC Comics imprint called Helix that shut down really quick. Helix was supposed to be kind of their cyberpunk. Separate from Vertigo. Label, and then it shut down really quickly.
It probably wasn't enough to do.
They had a few books. It's really funny because I think very recently, I'm not sure if it was Image or IDW, republished. Garth Ennis had done a series for Helix called Bloody Mary that was very much influenced by that 2000 AD. This was I think DC was trying to dip their toe into that sort of 2000 AD pond. By doing series like that, but it didn't last that long.
No.
But Transmetropolitan follows a character named Spider Jerusalem. Spider Jerusalem is very much. I view him as a futuristic version of Hunter S. Thompson.
Yeah.
But not quite Hunter S. Thompson either, though. I think he's a mixture of Hunter and Warren Ellis himself.
Yeah.
I even came up with a funny thing that's very interesting. When you first meet Spider, he has long hair and a beard.
Yeah.
Very much like Alan Moore. And then he ends up going into the city and gets everything taken off of him to where he's bald and clean shaven and he looks like Grant Morrison. So I don't know if Warren was. I've always put this on the as maybe it was a slight dig towards both of them.
Yeah, maybe.
It's very funny. To this day, me and Christina refer to candidates that we don't particularly like that tend to smile a lot as the Smiler, and it becomes a big plot point in Transmetropolitan, where basically Spider's trying to take down the presidency of the Smiler. And there's the previous president that he has an issue with, his name he refers to him as the Beast. And but it's funny because that sounds very superficial, like very political, superficial on level, but there's a lot of great issues of the book that really get you. I think every issue lets you feel the world,
right?
And what's even greater to me is that it always happens in one book per se. So in an issue of Transmetropolitan, it talks about this woman from our century who's frozen in cryogenics, and she's mistakenly awakened in this century, and everything's changed and everything's different. She doesn't understand where she is. Yeah. And that whole issue just follows her. Spider does very rarely, and he's not even involved in this, and it just kind of shows that like shock and awe of what happens when this being brought up, being awakened in a century that you're not aware of. But it has a very modern feel of like the idea of if that would happen to somebody nowadays, or almost being. To me, it always played off like being awakened from idealism to reality. And that's what Transmetropolitan deals with. Like you can apply a lot. I'm sorry, but the joke I've always made is that somebody like Ted Cruz is very much a smiler.
Sure,
I don't trust him because of that. He's a smiler. Whereas like you could make an even more correlation towards Donald Trump as the Beast. I made a comment a few weeks ago on my Facebook page about how sad I was that Hunter S. Thompson wasn't alive to see Donald Trump run for president, because he would be having a field day with this right now.
Yeah.
And but yeah, Transmet like very much falls into that, but it fleshes its characters out. Like Spider's a nasty character. He's a nasty piece of work. But when he writes, much akin to the way that Hunter S. Thompson is, and why I love Hunter S. Thompson is the same thing. He's a nasty piece of work.
Yeah.
But when you write it, you feel that wrath and that anger and towards the things that are wrong with the society that we live in.
Yeah.
And that's what I think a lot of people like just dismiss Hunter S. Thompson as like, oh, he was a drug-fueled maniac. He was. Yeah. But he also had a lot of poignant things to say about the world that we lived in.
Right.
He talks about how, like, everybody talked about hippie power and, the power of love and all these things in the 60s. And he writes this thing called the Wave Speech, where basically he talks about how, you could see the watermark where the wave crested and then it fell down.
Right.
And he talks about how those idealisms of like, we were almost there. We almost hit the watermark, the high watermark.
Yeah.
But then we lost it. We lost the plot. We didn't figure out what was going on. And there's a lot of like poignant things in Transmet that are the same way that could even apply to today. And this is a series that ran from 97 to 2002.
Yeah.
So this is like, it ended on like not long after the Bush presidency and 9/11. And it still to this day holds poignant marks about that stuff.
Yeah.
So if you really want to talk about something that's both enjoyable because Hunter, so Spider Jerusalem as it's sort of a funny, nasty piece of work that you get to follow, but it has a lot of poignant things to say about the world we live in today, which is a compliment that Warren Ellis gets a lot.
Yeah.
Warren Ellis is often seen as this dude who's almost been able to sort of predict the future in certain ways. Like throughout, and it's funny because apparently the Army has tried this tech. So in Transmet, they talk about it's this gun that basically if you shoot at somebody, makes them shit themselves.
Okay. Yeah.
And apparently, like, they've tried to work on a gun since then in the past 2 years that does that to people.
Yeah.
It's a sort of a quote unquote non-lethal.
Yeah.
Like, form of confrontation, a gun that doesn't shoot people, but it makes them shit themselves. So, and Warren Ellis invented this out of thin air.
Yeah.
And it's something that's kind of come true, but that's happened with a lot of his things. I'd actually recommend if you ever got anybody who listens to this, if you ever get a chance, Warren Ellis on occasion does this blog post called Morning Computer, in which he tries to. He does it as a writing exercise where he's trying to wake himself up. So instead of like consciously thinking about what he's writing. He just gets up and it's called Morning Computer, and it's him just typing whatever is on his brain at the minute that he wakes up. And it's very quick, it's very concise. I especially recommend it for people who are writers, who are the idea of like you're trying to clear out the cobwebs in your brain kind of thing. So that's my number 4, Transmet. It's fantastic stuff. Derek Robertson doesn't get. I talked a lot about Warren Ellis, but Derek Robertson's artwork is fantastic as well. He actually did. Speaking of like weirdly personal connections, he did the first issue cover to Martian Comics, which we've talked about before.
Cool.
He did the first issue cover for that as well.
All right, so I'm actually I'm adjusting on the fly here a little bit. I'm deciding to put for my number 3, Bone by Jeff Smith.
You know, the fact that didn't even make my honorable mentions makes me feel really bad because I've never finished the series. I think I've read what would essentially be the first 20 some odd issues of it.
Yeah, something like that.
I don't know how long it ran for.
It ran a lot. I have the I say a lot. It's actually not terribly long because there is a 1-volume omnibus that does fit the entire thing in one book.
I own that.
Yeah. So
Christina bought it. We got lucky. We found it at Half Price Books.
That is rad, though.
And we paid like $15 for essentially the whole run of it.
Yeah, I have the in front of me right now. I have the Scholastic edition, which is the colored. Version.
Which is so cool. I always loved the idea that Scholastic did that.
Yeah.
To introduce this to generations of audiences to pick this book up. I mean,
a lot of people.
That's really what it is with
a lot of students. I mean, I've as a teacher who's been like, oh, hey, we're gonna watch this movie, and the question always comes up, is it in black and white? I'm like, maybe, and they're like, oh, and I'm always like, y'all are so dumb. I don't understand you. But Bone is
black and white's so old.
Yeah, Bone is probably one of the first independent, really independent books that I remember hearing about. Because right when we were getting kind of back into comics in our teenage years, when I had money to spend because got my first job, and Wizard, we talked about Wizard before, that we actually found a lot of these books through Wizard. Through Wizard magazine, and Bone was one of those ones that I remember it being a big deal because the first issue, they did so many printings of it, 8 or 9 printings that kept selling out. They would print it and then it would sell out and print it and sell out and print it and sell out because of course it was an independent book, and so he could only afford to print so many of them, and then they would sell out and then
that would be around. And what time did we start reading that? Because we moved to Texas in 97.
Yeah, he started in 1991.
We started reading it, but that would have been around 94, 95.
It was in Memphis, because I got my job in 94 for my first job.
So it would be 94, 95.
And so Bone is one of those books that I actually used to have some individual issues of, but it was kind of hard to keep track of because you'd buy one. And then if you missed the next issue, you were out of luck.
Yeah.
But Bone is a story revolves around the bones from Boneville. Yeah. I'm sorry?
Just keep talking.
Okay. It revolves around the bones from Boneville. In particular, we have the lead character really is Phone Bone. He's kind of like your everyman character. He really loves Moby Dick. And then you have his cousins, Smiley Bone, who is taller than the rest and smokes cigars all the time. Is kind of goofy, loves gambling, but seems kind of dim-witted, at least compared to some people think that he's dim-witted. And then you have Phony Bone, who is always scheming to get rich. And the reason why the Bones have left Boneville is because they got run out of town because of one of Phony Bone's schemes. And they end up in a place called the Valley. And this is where it enters into the territory of fantasy because, first of all, one of the first characters you meet is a dragon. And what I found fascinating about the introduction of the dragon is how Bone meets him early on, but he tells other people about it and they're like, oh, dragons are there's no such thing as dragons. That's crazy talk. But then other people know that there's dragons.
Yeah.
And so there's kind of
I think it's funny when you finally meet him too.
Yeah,
he's kind of like it comes out of nowhere.
Well, you meet him like right at the beginning. I mean,
but in a good
right
way. Yeah.
It's just, but it's so funny that there's something going on, and characters are interconnected. There's a mystery to it all, and I kind of like that the way that it builds toward a mystery. This, like I mentioned, I think I mentioned this before. Either I said it to you in passing or I'm going to say it now. The theme of this is I have not finished any of these books because I'm terrible at doing that.
Well, it's really funny is that Christina has, like, this is one of her favorite.
Yeah.
We got that omnibus, and actually I have to get it back because I have a friend who actually has it out right now.
Yeah.
Because Christina's like, get that back for me because like I want to be able to. She wants to be able to Dalton eventually read that because it is a great introduction in both. This is the case of. We kind of talked about it to a degree with like the Amblin movies of the 80s. This is something that I think that both kids and adults can enjoy.
Yes.
It doesn't talk down to kids.
No.
And it's not childish enough for adults. It kind of does that great balance of both.
Yeah, I think this is a good example of one of those sorts of books that balances the kids and the adults. I mean, if you think about it, this was published again and got notoriety among independent comic book people. This was not originally being read by kids, but then Scholastic put it out. Later on. So I think that's a really good thing.
Well, remember he was self-publishing it, and then eventually I think he got involved with Image for a little bit. For a little bit, where Image was publishing this.
Yeah, and his artwork again. He's one of those. He's definitely a cartoonist in a lot of his style. Bone was heavily influenced from. I'm going to forget the name again. That happens to me all the time. It's like a hedgehog character or something.
I was going to say Charles Schultz, but that's not it.
No. Pogo? Is that it?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I've heard of Pogo, though.
I think it's Pogo. And anyways, so it's got a lot of the cartoony part of it, but then, of course, like your people are more realistic, and there's Phone Bone's love interest is Thorn.
It flows really well though together. I think when they have those interactions between these sort of cartoony characters, with the Bone characters and then the human characters, it works. I don't think it never feels off.
No, but I love the artwork and the style, and the writing is really good. It's funny. It has lots of funny things, but there's always this underlying tension, something serious going on in the background. So I just really like Bone. So I went ahead and put that at number 3.
Number 3 for me is Lock and Key.
All right.
Lock and Key is this is one of those weird things where I was trying to figure out how you would distinguish this. So Lock and Key was a series of mini-series by Joe Hill and Gabriel Rodriguez. So it was the same creative team. I will say for the record that besides Tony Moore, Gabriel Rodriguez is probably my second favorite comic book cartoonist / artist person.
Yeah, he's really good.
His stuff is amazing.
Yeah.
I don't even know. My number 3 is actually in my number 3 artist is in my number 1 spot. We'll get to that later. But yeah, it's there's a style to him, and what it really comes down to is the people whose artwork I tend to love are people who they are all encompassing. So they're doing their own penciling, and then they're doing their own inks, and there's no disconnect in their style.
Right.
But it's not just. It's this meld of a writer and artist's work coming together. So Joe Hill, who, if people don't know who Joe Hill is, his father is only the most famous horror writer of all time, and Stephen King. So his name is Joseph King. But he goes by Joe Hill. And what's great about Joe is he's amazing in his own right, and he was able to become that without his father's name. Some great novels that you can go out and check out. Horns would be the one that me and Christina consistently talk about. We love Horns. It's one of my favorite books. But his other books too. He's got a book called Nosferatu, and a book called and Nosferatu is NOS for Nos for. I think it's ATU. I have to look it up because it's a license plate. It's supposed to look like a license plate for Nosferatu. And he also did his first book called Heart Shaped Box. Fantastic. And he's got a short story collection called 20th Century Ghosts, which is even better because it's got a mishmash of styles. So it kind of shows that sort of in the way that Stephen King almost did too, to where he could show that he could scare you, make you laugh, but in his own right. Like he doesn't feel like his dad in terms of his writing.
Right.
But Lock and Key is about a family. It's about the Locke family basically, and they are basically a tragedy happens at a cabin that they live at.
Yeah.
Or that they live at, but they go to this summer cabin that they own.
Yeah.
The patriarch of the family is a school teacher in the town that they normally lived in. Well, when they're at this cabin, this happens all within the first issue, so I'm not spoiling anything.
No.
A former student comes to the cabin with a friend of his, and they murder the family, they murder the dad, and they rape. Sorry, they rape the mother, and then they leave the three kids are managed to live, and they manage to escape, and they kind of do damage to one of the perpetrators is killed, and then the other one is locked up in jail.
Yeah,
and they move back to this mansion property that is in their family for the longest time. It was managed by their uncle though, because their dad moved away, and it's about everything that happens when they move into that. And the story that happens there. Yeah. I don't want to. This is one of those books I don't want to say anymore because I don't want to ruin it for anybody. No. But it's the story of a family.
Yes,
and it's all encompassing too. It's not. It doesn't focus on just one individual character.
Yeah,
it lets you fully realize everybody. And part of that is Gabriel Rodriguez's artwork. The way he talks. It's Bodhi, Tyler, and is it Kinsey? Are the main children's names. So somebody's going to be like, I'm trying to remember this off the top of my brain without looking them up.
Yeah, I wish I could.
But remember. I want to say that it's Tyler, Kinsey, and Bodhi, or Bode. I always call them Bode. I want to say it's Bodhi. I've heard it can be either one. It's Bode.
Yeah, I've only ever seen it.
And it's... I don't know what else I could say about it. It's just, it's so encompassing. They draw you into this world. And this is one of those rare times where I blind picked up something. So back when me and Shu first had our son Chunk, and we had no money, we were going to the library and we were picking the stuff up. And oddly enough, our local library had the first volume of Lock and Key on their shelves, and so I picked it up because it was Joe Hill.
Yeah, and
I had read some Joe Hill, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna pick this up. I like the artwork, and we're gonna see where it goes from there.
Yeah,
because the greatest thing is that Gabriel Rodriguez has such a distinctive art style too that you kind of are like, this is interesting. I want to pick this up. I want to look through this, and we got that. And it was downhill. I read it in a day. Christina then picked it up right after me, and I don't think people realize this is because we've had her on so many episodes is that me and her don't necessarily always have the same taste in things.
Right.
In fact, we tend to, when we recommend something to the other one kind of doesn't necessarily either watch, read, or listen to it.
Yeah.
See how I brought that around. And so, but when me and her find common ground on something, and that was one of the ones that we found complete common ground on.
Right.
Because we both fell in love with it from the minute we read it, and we were both like, oh my god, we want to keep reading this story. So I mean, there are 6 volumes of this book out now at this point. What's kind of cool, the way they did it was they did release them as miniseries. So basically there's 6 volumes, 1 to 6 for each miniseries issue, but they tell a complete story.
Yeah.
And so if you pick them up, buy the first volume, read them all to the end. There are issues in here that I can say as a dude who has no problems with his feelings that made me cry.
Yeah.
And really, I was super invested in from the get-go, to where me and Christina own, I think it's volume 4, Keys to the Kingdom. We own all of that to the end because we love this so much. So I still own those individual issues because I loved it that much. So
yeah. Cool.
So Lock and Key would be my number 3.
All right. So my number 2 is a book that I'm willing to bet most people around here haven't heard of. I got into this book because there was a comic book store.
I know this.
Memphis.
Like I was here for this story.
Yeah,
so I was like, no,
called Triple Play Comics. That was in. It was kind of in an odd place because it was by itself in what used to be a bank.
Yes,
and you could tell it was a bank because it had like a drive-through or like a drive-up window for the teller and stuff like that.
It's funny because the minute I walked into the studio to record the episode, Dwayne had them stacked on his desk, and I was like, "Holy crap! I forgot about this book."
Yeah,
and
I was trying to remember how many issues of this that I had, because I've been looking at the trade paperback that I have, which I have there's several trade paperbacks now. I have the second one.
Now makes me want to go back and see if he's
Green
what
book.
Is he doing right now?
He's actually still doing some stuff, and so this is called Thieves and Kings, and this comic book store, Triple Play Comics in Memphis. They special ordered this for me. Basically, they had an issue of it, but basically I said, "Hey, I want to get this every time," and they got it for me. Basically,
but the first issue is that it was put into your box because you were subscribing to Bone.
Yes, that's right.
So that's why you got the first issue, and then you basically said, "Hey." Was it under special conditions that you had to?
Yes, I had to write
into the author,
and I did,
and subscribe to it essentially if you liked it.
And this is a book.
They give it to you for free.
Yeah, Thieves and Kings is by a guy named Mark Oakley from Canada.
I always knew him as Moke.
Yeah, Moke.
Because
that's how he introduces himself at the beginning. He says, "I'm Moke. Welcome to the first issue of Thieves and Kings. Let's get down to business." So that's how it starts off, right? His artwork, first of all, let's talk about artwork. This is another example of somebody who's very much in the cartooning style.
It's very distinctive. I couldn't put you I couldn't describe.
It reminds me of a combination of. Well, I say a combination of. It reminds me a little bit of those old adventure comics from the Sunday ones that I could never get into because there would be one panel of like Prince Valiant, and you would pick it up and you'd be like, I don't know what's happening in this story.
But there's a fun like cartoony style to it.
Yeah,
too,
they're
though.
cartoony, but they're also really detailed. Like, look at how much detail is in this page.
Oh yeah,
I'll have to post. I have to links to this in the.
But the thing
notes.
I always reminded me of too when you look at the covers, because I know he did them in watercolor.
Yeah.
So it always reminded me of Bill Watterson in that regards. It doesn't look like Bill Watterson's style, but because it's in that, like when you would see Calvin and Hobbes in color in the Sunday newspaper.
Yes,
there was because he did them in watercolors and paints. There was a beauty to it, and the same with I think every single cover of Thieves and Kings that I've ever seen. They're just beautiful pieces of art.
Oh yeah,
in and of themselves. Yeah, that's the thing. Like you look through every single one of them. I can't think of a single one that I'm like the beauty involved in those covers.
Yeah,
and the watercolors of them is amazing.
Yeah, they're really detailed. But it's also simple. It's kind of
it's not overcomplicated. Like his character,
nothing's overly complicated. Everything is really detailed. It also does a thing that a lot of comics don't do, and he does a lot of combination of prose and comics. And so there are segments in here where you're actually reading the comic book,
which is something that you would. It's funny because at the time you were getting this, I don't think I had really gone back and read a lot of because I was only 13 at the time, so I hadn't read a lot of Alan Moore at the time. So it's fascinating to know that, like, I think I was more accepting of reading something like Watchmen that did that because we had been reading Thieves and Kings, which did that same thing. So I was more willing to like read something that had prose work in it, especially when it came to going back and reading those like the stalwarts of quote unquote comic books in and of themselves because of what Mark Oakley did with Thieves and Kings. Yeah, and that's why it made me. It's like it's kind of like when we talked about Darwin Cook last week, and I was like, oh, Mark Oakley. I'm like, holy crap, I haven't thought about him in a long time.
Yeah.
But if somebody were to be like, what is he doing, or if he had passed away, I'd probably be like, holy crap, no, not him, because Thieves and Kings was a really good book.
Yes,
that had a huge impact. I really want to say, but that and Bone. I'm going out on a limb here by saying this. I'm speaking for myself, but maybe towards you is that I want to say those are what gave us the idea of getting out of superhero books.
Yeah, I would say so.
If I really wanted to like pinpoint a place where I felt that we were comfortable stepping out of the quote unquote superhero genre and really looking at comic books that were doing something different would be those two books.
Oh yeah,
because there was such an early progression towards what you're doing.
Yeah, and this is a book that really you connect very emotionally with the characters. One of the main characters is Rubel, who's a thief, and then there's Heath, who is a sorceress, young sorceress, and there's it's kind of the same sort of thing. It's like there's this adventure part of it. There's funny parts to it. There's a wizard named Quentin who is like kind of terrible. The first time you meet him, he's also like, he's terrible, but he's also like the most powerful wizard ever. So
right.
It's like when you first meet him, he's wearing like your standard conical wizard hat.
Yeah.
And he's like, I wear this hat in order to channel all of the energies of the universe into my head.
I wonder how much of an influence, and I didn't think about it, how much of an influence was Terry Pratchett's books on him? Now that I think about it, now that you've said that,
because I've just started reading The Color of Magic.
I think about
again.
Rincewind, and I'm like,
yeah. I think so.
But you started talking about that character, and I was like, holy crap! Like I never had that connection.
Yeah,
I never thought about it before.
You get this wizard who is like, he's talking, and it sounds like, okay, you're just crazy,
gibberish and crazy.
You're just dumb,
yeah.
and you're kind of stupid, and you don't know what's going on. But when you realize that the reason he doesn't seem to know what's going on is because there's something way more going on. Like I said, the wizard hat, he's like, or maybe I'm just dumping the contents of my brain out into this universe.
Yeah.
You know, if this isn't working correctly, it's like, I don't know. So it's really good. The artwork is amazing. There is stuff on his website. I went to the website. There's stuff you can buy. There's
that's what I was going to say. Is there a way to find this? Because
there is a new trade. There are trades for sale.
This might be the hardest thing to find out.
Oh, it's not hard to find at all. There's a new one that is a combination of the first volume and the second volume. I've got the second volume. It's called the Green Book.
Yeah.
There was a red book and a blue book and a green book in different colors. And there is a new version of the second one where he's actually rescanned the artwork, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Because that was the weirdest thing, because I think the way he was printing it, because this reminded me the most, the best I could put it would be like, and I don't know if it's on your list at all, because we're almost that's your number 2, isn't it?
Yeah, you know what my number 1 is.
So, Cerebus by Dave Sim, which we haven't talked about either.
Yeah, I haven't.
It reminded me of that. Like, I didn't put Cerebus on my list, and I didn't even want to put on that on because I want to say I've only ever read the first volume.
Yes,
and so
yeah,
I don't think we can have this conversation though without talking about Dave Sim, but we'll put a pin in that.
No, but he's definitely part
and
of
talk
this.
about. But I always remember like feeling like the thing about reading the Thieves and Kings like individual episodes is because they were printed on that sort of like very cheap photo paper or newspaper, newsprint,
basically.
That you felt bad because I think every issue I ever read, I would end up with black spots all over my fingers by the time I was done.
You're ruining the artwork.
And you're ruining the artwork.
Yeah.
Which is like, it goes to show you the length to which he was publishing those. Like, he was doing this himself.
Yeah.
He had them going to a printer and they were printing them out.
Yeah.
He didn't have a major.
No, these are published by iBox Publishing, which only publishes Thieves and Kings.
Yeah, so
and I have way more issues of this than I thought I did.
Amazing.
I have 46 issues of it.
Yeah.
Plus the one trade, which I think I have a gap in here, and I think the trade fills the gap.
Considering that was in the the mid '90s, I wonder if he had continued. I wonder how many issues he actually has of this.
There's more trades. There's way more trades than this. So.
Wow.
There has to be. Matter of fact, he even had a kind of a collection of some of the stuff with the wizard Quentin. So
if he had an omnibus, it would make me laugh.
But Thieves and Kings is an awesome book. Everybody should check it out. It's amazing.
My number 2, and it's funny because this is one of those times where I had my list figured out, and then this morning I wanted to hit myself because I forgot this book, and it perfectly deserves my number 2. This is one of those issues. It's a finished book, so you can actually get all. It was published for 32 issues, all 32 volumes, and that is Rick Remender and Tony Moore's The Fear Agent. And it made me laugh because like there in that game we've talked about before that we played, Ingress.
Yeah,
my name is the Fear Agent. because of this book, because it almost involves the plot of essentially of what Ingress is, and that aliens are trying to get into the world that we exist in, and that it's about humans who fight back against them. But it really follows is a Texan, so there's a little bit of familiarity to me in there. A Texan named Heath Houston, who's a cigar smoking, drinking kind of fuck up. I don't know what way to put it. He's the last Fury agent, basically. Fury agents basically were these. When aliens invaded the world, they were this group of humans who banded together to fight the alien incursion. Yeah, and Heath is the last of these, and it kind of is his story. You go throughout the whole idea of from the beginning. You don't at the beginning of the series. You kind of beat him in the middle. Yeah, and it kind of it gives you the backstory, and then it kind of tells you his history of what happened. This is one of those things, though. I will say is as far as a team goes, because this was a book created by Rick Remender and Tony Moore, and I've said Tony Moore is one of my favorite artists. Jerome Opeña had a couple issues that he helped do with, so they actually had some fill-in work done by other artists, but they still brought a cohesiveness to this. So if you were to read all 32 issues, there's a good cohesiveness. There's some times where it almost feels like they picked Jerome Opeña's work because it had a familiarity to Tony Moore's, but it's not exactly like Tony Moore's. And this is the same thing. It's got a character that you can identify with, who's emotional, that you can follow all those emotional beats with him. And it's the same thing as anything else that I've talked about. You can follow those beats. Now, what's kind of cool is that originally the first 11 issues were published by Image, but because it's a creator-owned work, Rick Remender and Tony Moore actually ended up taking it to Dark Horse. So it's currently, if you want to buy it, you can buy it from Dark Horse. Cool. Dark Horse even released, if you want to just go ahead and get it out of the way, there's 2 volumes of what would be considered like a library / omnibus edition of a Fury Agent that you can buy that has every single issue published, basically in 2 volumes that you can read, and glorious hardcover and beautiful blown up, and it's amazing. Yeah, it's one of those things where it's it's everything involved in it. There's this is what made me really kind of fall in love with Rick Remender's art, writing. I was already in love with Tony Moore's artwork, but it made me fall a little bit more in love because I know that he based a lot of the stuff, a lot of the appearance. He said the appearance of Heath is based off of his grandpa, for instance. And there's a lot of emotional weight, a lot of things that happen, a lot of twists and turns. They go places that you don't think that most writers or most stories would go. Yeah. In terms of you think, oh, this is what's going to happen, and then it twists it on you, and it's really honestly about Heath Houston's fuck ups throughout his life, and it really is his story too. So it lets you kind of get involved with that. Yeah. And I'm trying to think of what else. The coolest thing too is if you get them in a trade basis. So if you buy them from Dark Horse, they're fairly cheap, $9.99 to it's $12 a piece for each trade. Sure. All the trades and the storylines are usually based off of punk songs. Okay. Cool. So Reignition, My War. The Last Goodbye, Hatchet Job, Eye Against Eye, Out of Step. It's kind of cool to realize that it comes all out of that scene. So that's even a cooler little small little take that I love. So we're gonna take a break, and then we're gonna get back to our number ones, which will probably be the longest part of this discussion. All right, so we're at number ones. What's your number one?
Number one. All right, so my number one of a non-superhero comic book is probably my number one. If I think about it, probably my number one ever, although Excalibur is really hard, but that's, again, that's a superhero comic book. So it's basically between Excalibur, especially Alan Davis and Chris Claremont run, and Strangers in Paradise by Terry Moore. We mentioned Terry Moore last time talking about Rachel Rising, his newest book, which is, I think, actually, he may have finally finished it. I'm not 100% sure.
I can tell you.
I looked at his Facebook page, and he had an issue, and he said something about it being like the end or something like that. And so I'm wondering if he's concluded the story, because that's kind of been his thing. Is he's been doing pretty much regularly doing comics for since Strangers in Paradise started. Like that's been like a regular thing. He started off wanting to get into newspaper comic strips, and then when that didn't quite work out, he started publishing Strangers in Paradise in 1993. I actually have the first 3 issues in the normal single issue format. Which, of course, these are not original printings. These are just like with Bone. These sold out immediately,
right,
when they first came out. And then I have trades of.
I have one of your trades actually too. So.
Yeah, I was actually looking for "I Dream of You."
Yes, I have it.
Yeah, the second volume. The first volume of Strangers in Paradise is very much a self-contained. Some people call it slice of life, but that's a very weighted term or maybe even a meaningless term. Yeah. But it's basically a story of these three people, Kachu, Francine, and David, and relationships basically. And what Strangers in Paradise, what's at the heart of it, regardless of whatever else happens, what's at the heart of Strangers in Paradise is the relationship between these 3 people.
Yeah.
And so you have,
which is weird, because it ties into my number 1 too. So the same concept.
Yeah, Kachu is your. She's the. She's an artist. She's got a checkered past.
Yeah.
She's very blunt and forthright with what she thinks. She doesn't have any problem like you just punching somebody out or whatever.
Yeah.
Francine is more, traditionally pretty, but she's, upset about her weight. She struggles with that off and on. She's had problems with relationships where she gets with guys because she's trying to find the one person to love her. And the first volume deals with her breakup with Freddie Femur. Which, talk about a name, who he finds, she finds him cheating with his secretary, and that kind of spirals everything out of control for her.
Yeah.
This is a book that the relationships among these characters is really interesting, because this is a book that gets a lot of credit for the fact that it doesn't put a lot of labels on people.
No,
it doesn't sit there and say, we're going to write a book about gay people, or we're going to write a book about straight people, or we're going to write a book about whatever people. It just lets the relationships kind of be there.
Yes.
And they're really complex, and there's a lot going on, and you get to see how people deal with their inner demons and their past, their mistakes, and I've always found it fascinating. We talked about Terry Moore's artwork already, but his artwork is always been really good.
It's amazing. Yeah.
The only thing I have a problem with is I really don't like this cover.
Yeah, that's an older style like one. Yeah, if you post it, like it's very much like that's one of the first images that I think I ever saw of it too. Yeah. And I think that
it's funny because the inside doesn't look like that at all.
Yeah, you can almost view it as unappealing, and then you go, you look in the insides, and you're like, okay, this is actually
it's not terrible. It's just it's for some reason the artwork on the front cover of the first issue looks significantly different than the artwork inside.
Right.
But like I said, this whole thing, Kachu and Francine are friends from high school, and the basic way that it runs out is that Kachu's basically been in love with Francine for years, but she, they had problems. They separated from each other over time, and they got back together. Found each other again, and then David shows up, and David becomes infatuated with Kachu,
right?
And then you have this whole, so who's going to be with whom, and what's going to happen with that, and but then you also have, like I said before, the past. So
it's the idea of the complexity of human relationships. It's not as simple as when you listen to people argue on Facebook. Everything's in such black and white terms.
Yes. Yeah.
That what I loved about Strangers in Paradise, from what I've read, and I haven't read nearly as much as you have, is that it deals with the complexities of that. Things are gray. Things are not black and white.
Right.
Labels do not mean anything.
Yeah, and people don't, you don't get together and then just live happily ever after. Like that doesn't happen. Your relationships will continue, and then they change, and then sometimes things happen, and people, you think they should end up together and they don't. One other thing that he does a lot of is he plays around with time a lot. So you have points where it jumps forward in time,
right,
and then fills in some so you're seeing the future of the relationship, and then it goes back to where the present is. And then, of course, they do cover the past as well, going back to the past and seeing what's happened. I mean, even when the book opens, it actually opens up with something that happened in their high school that he then picks back up 40 issues later.
Yeah.
Stuff like that happens a lot. This is all one now complete story. There is an omnibus version of it. It is gigantic.
I don't doubt. Jeez.
I looked it up. It's about $100 to buy. So if anybody wants to buy that, I'll put a link to it on Amazon if you can buy it for me.
Yeah. And at the same point, you can make the same argument that money goes towards the creator who spent that time on this work. And this is a singular work.
Yeah.
As well. I can't even say that about my number one, because my number one still was published through a mainstream company. Wasn't there a brief time too where, much like Jeff Smith, Terry Moore was publishing through Image Comics for
there was
a brief period of time, and it wasn't very long.
Do I have any of those issues, or are they in this other one? I don't remember now.
I just seem to remember that there was a time where he was publishing through Image.
Yeah, there were a few.
I think the majority of it was published through.
And I think he did that primarily just because he needed to.
Well, who's publishing Rachel Rising?
Abstract.
Is it through Abstract?
Yeah,
okay.
It's all independent. Echo.
Yeah.
It's also independent, and actually, it's in here.
I want to see with Echo though. I thought he published a little bit of that through. Didn't Echo, one of them was published through Marvel's Icon imprint for a short time?
Oh, here we go.
But I could be wrong.
There was through Image, because actually there's a cover of here with Francine and Kachu, and it's Jim Lee.
Yes,
characters.
But and it's kind of.
So this is an independent book.
There was a time period where what's funny was me and you were just having an off mic conversation about Image.
Yeah.
There was a period where a lot of the original Image founders after they had left, where Image was kind of in this weird flux of time. So it was before the popularity of, say, The Walking Dead, where they were publishing. They had gotten people who were self-publishing books. So people like Jeff Smith and people like Terry Moore, they were getting these creators to come on board with Image to publish that particular title through Image.
Right.
Which is great about the way that the Image model is set up. And it's something that I think that Image has shown that they're stronger at in probably the past 10 years, especially with creator, especially since The Walking Dead. They've really kind of gone out of their way of really we talked about non-superhero work, and that's kind of something that I think that they've done a really good job of it for the big, what we would call now the big three. The big three are Marvel, DC, and Image. And it's a great documentary by the guys at Sequirt that we've talked about before. Sequirt did a documentary called The Image Revolution, in which they really talk about that. What the guys at Image did, and even though none of them are really even involved except for Todd McFarlane with Image anymore, is that they gave a platform and an idea of creator-owned work.
Yes.
And Image is still doing that over 20 years later.
Yeah. To
where they're allowing creators to come in and really publish their own works, and none of it really is superhero involved. It's all it's a creator coming in and telling their own story. I figured I threw Saga out there before. That reminds me of honorable mentions, because Saga and Why the Last Man, which was published by Vertigo, hadn't had a chance. But Brian K. Vaughan, Brian K. Vaughan coming on board and doing a book with Image was a huge steal. Yeah, and actually a lot of creators who are having issues with the big two are essentially jumping ship, and they're going and doing work for Image. They're doing their own work for Image and for Dark Horse right now at this point. So continue about Changes of Paradise, because I went on a long rant. So.
No, but I just wanted to mention.
I had to throw that all out there.
I mean, Strangers in Paradise is remarkable in the fact that, number one, and this is an interview that Terry Moore did a few years ago that you sent to me through
Yes.
Facebook, where he
I'm gonna
talks
throw
about
some clips in here as well.
Yeah, he talks about this fact that the key point for him has just always been like get the book out, like publish the book. He says it takes him. He's like, it takes me 6 weeks to make the book. I can't do it in 4, so every 6 weeks will be a book.
Yep.
It was just like that will and if you get that book out, and it's kind of funny. Like I kind of lost track of Strangers in Paradise in the early 2000s, primarily just for financial reasons. I just couldn't afford to buy comic books. And then the next thing I knew, like Stranger in Paradise was finishing, but he went right into Echo.
Yeah.
Published that story that's complete.
Rachel Rising seems really fascinating. I might have to grab those trades from you and let you to read them when you get when you're done with them.
The only problem I have right now, I realized I do have the first trade in individual issues, except for issue 2. They didn't have issue 2 at the comic book store when I went and bought it, but I did get issue 3 signed. A signed edition by Terry Moore at Bedrock City Comics.
Well, we should mention that, and I actually kicked myself because we didn't mention it in the last episode.
Yeah,
is that Terry Moore is based in where we live? He's based in Houston.
Yeah, I found my my signed copy of Echo, first issue of Echo, and it's like Abstract Studios, and it's P.O. Box, and then Houston, Texas.
Yeah, because he actually makes a lot of frequent appearances as the downtown location of Bedrock City Comics, which is a kind of like I guess you call them a chain, but they're in our area.
Yeah, in Houston.
They've had about like 3 or 4 locations, and we've been going to them since we moved here.
Yeah,
and
there's actually scenes, parts of Stranger in Paradise take place in Houston.
Yeah,
because they own a house in the Heights.
Yeah,
for a while.
And so it's kind of one of those things where I was like, oh, here's somebody who like he's local too at that. Yeah. So it's even crazier to realize that. Like, and I think he does really good work. But yeah, I haven't read all of Strangers in Paradise. I even have I think I've read the first volume. Yes, and I have your second volume at my house because I haven't finished reading it. And I was like, oh, yeah, I need to do that.
That's good because I was wondering where that was.
You could have asked me, and I was.
Well, I had that moment. I was like, did I give that to David to borrow, or did I give it to somebody else to borrow?
What's weird, before I jump into my number 1 too, is I think somebody that needs to be talked about that not a lot of people talk about because of he has some polarizing ideas, and he's a polarizing figure in comics, much akin to Frank Miller. People are pretty sure that Dave Sim has lost his brain. And that's what he did in 1977. He started self-publishing, and he was he's still up in Canada. He started self-publishing Cerebus in 1977. Ran for 300 issues. Yeah, 300 issues self-published the entire time. Yeah, and I think a lot of the work and a lot of the frame of which a lot of companies like Image and Dark Horse, those companies wouldn't exist necessarily today the way they exist if it was not for the model that Dave Sim set up. And he also proved that a lot of creators can fail at this. Yeah. And he proved that a lot of them can succeed. Yeah. I think somebody like a Terry Moore succeeds because he almost adheres to that model. He's like you said, he talks in an interview about being like, okay, well, every 6 weeks there's an issue, even if it's not out on a monthly basis. Say it's on a bi-monthly basis, which is what Cerebus was for a lot of its run.
Yeah. That's what Mark Oakley was talking about. In Kings.
It's that realistic standard of going like, I'm doing this by myself. Yeah, and a lot of people need to realize that. It was kind of one of the things that I was hoping to kind of pinpoint when we talked about Darwin Cook and about the Hero Initiative. A lot of these guys this is why you shouldn't pirate work. Yeah. These guys need your money for this stuff. If you don't have the money and you can't read it, well, then don't read it. Yeah. When you do have the money, come back and buy it. Yeah. Because this is where these guys are getting their money from. They are creators because of that. Yeah. These are not guys like Alan Moore who can sustain himself off of Watchmen royalties. Yeah. And I'm not taking anything away from Alan Moore at all. I have a tremendous amount of respect for Alan Moore. Yes. He gets to live in the town that he was born in, and he doesn't have to worry about coming over to America and dealing with all this other crap. He can be very self-sustaining on this stuff and create the art that he wants to create. Right. But not everybody is Alan Moore. But these guys are making work that is just as good as Alan Moore. A guy like Terry Moore, his name should be a little bit more well-known. Yeah. And we're going to get into my number 1. And my number 1, the writer is probably pretty well-known within comic circles. The artist, I think is okay. My number one is Preacher, and published by Vertigo for 75 issues from 1995 through 2000. This is 66 regular issues by Garth Ennis and Steve Dillon.
Yeah.
5 one-shots by Garth and a couple of different artists, and then a 4-issue miniseries called The Saint of Killers.
Right.
Comes out to a total of 75 issues. That's math for you right there.
Yeah.
I don't. It's hard for me to talk about Preacher because there's something that I love about this book that I can't quite put my finger on to a degree. I've gone on record for a lot of. I might have even maybe even on the podcast is that my favorite comic book character is Jesse Custer.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things about Jesse that I love. There's a lot of flaws in his character.
Sure.
He is not a perfect character, but like Strangers in Paradise, like you talked about before, this is really the story of 3 characters. This is the story of Jesse Custer, his ex-girlfriend Tulip, and their friend Cassidy.
Yeah.
Who happens to be an Irish vampire. And we thought it was kind of timely to talk about this because we're recording this on a Saturday basically tomorrow.
So tomorrow, yeah.
Which would be 4 days. It'll be 5 days when we air this podcast. So 5 days in the past has been the premiere of AMC's Preacher.
Yeah.
Adapted by Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg. It's really, I put Preacher number 1, and then I sat there and started thinking about it. Like, it's not that it's hard to talk about, but that there's a lot of emotional beats involved.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that when you reread the comic book, are incredibly dated. I will say that for the record.
Sure.
There's a lot of juvenile humor to it as well, which I think is still funny, and it adds a bit of charm.
Yeah.
But it's funny because I actually listened to an interview with, I read an interview with Garth Ennis earlier today, kind of in prep for the episode, where he says that Preacher was very much written on the fly.
Yeah.
It was not. He did not have everything structured out. He doesn't write that same way today.
Right.
The way he wrote Preacher, which I think actually is what benefits Preacher. I still like some of what Garth writes to this day. I don't like it as much as Preacher.
Sure.
There's something very a writer figuring stuff out, but trying to tell a whole story that fits within Preacher. There are those offensive bits that people will talk about. Yeah, but he's still telling this story of 3 people. Yeah, and really, it's Jesse, Tulip, and Cassidy's story, and it's all encompassing within all 3 characters. Yeah, and I've never had the first time I think. And the reason that Preacher is always number 1, and it's one of my favorite, it still is my favorite comic book series of all time. This is over even a superhero book, is that it hits those emotional beats. Yeah, and I've never had a comic equal those, especially when you get into volume. Well, I think the way they're publishing it now, you could read it in volume 1, but in volume 2, how I read it, right. Back in the day, when they used to release them in like 8-issue chunks. Right, I think they're issuing them in now 12-issue chunks, was when I read Until the End of the World, which goes into Jesse's backstory. So for 8 issues, you get to meet Jesse Custer, and you get to talk to him, and you get to follow him and Cassidy and Tulip in this power that he gets with when Genesis basically absorbs and becomes one with him, and he has what's known as quote unquote the Word of God. Right, and there's a lot of great funny character bits in those first 8 issues that I really love still to this day. Yeah. Even rereading them and going back, oh, that's really funny. I remember that. That's really funny. That's, it's really when you get into Jesse's backstory that I'm trying to figure out a way to do this without spoiling things. But, I actually don't care because, Jesse's father is murdered in front of him. And he even talks about this. And it's that whole story of his mother's side of the family and basically the horrendously evil people that they are, and how he had to, I don't want to say overcome, that's not but basically how he had to break away from them, and how eventually he has to come back and realize that he pretty much has to rid them of existence without spoiling anything, but he basically realizes this whole thing But it also is, while it's the story of his family and his backstory and the love between two people, it's the love. It's the story about the love between his mother and father that creates him, but it's also about the love between him and Tulip.
Sure.
Where they've been building up for 8 issues before that they're angry at each other.
Yeah.
Because what you glean is that Jesse had left her years before out of the blue, didn't tell her anything. He just was gone.
Literally gone.
And he tells her eventually that, sorry, spoilers, I'm going to give you guys, this is in the first volume. So whatever. If you haven't read it, this is a book has stopped publishing 16 years ago. Is that these members of these people who follow his grandmother have found him. They found him on a park bench and basically said, we're going to shoot her in the face if you don't come with us.
Yeah. And
so he does. And she comes back to this park bench there in, I think, Arizona. Most of the story takes place in Texas. And Tulip comes back to the park bench and Jesse's not there.
Yeah.
And she's been mad at him this whole time. So when they first meet each other in the book in issue 1, that's kind of the crux of what's going on with their relationship. There's this pin thread where they are irritated with each other because she's mad because he left her out of the blue, and he is irritated because he has a justification.
Yeah.
But he can't tell her.
Right.
Yet.
Right.
And he does.
Yeah.
And it's got some of those moments. I think it's the first time I ever cried during a comic book.
Sure.
When he tells her the whole story. So I'm going to give some beats away because he tells her the whole story between his mother and his father, what happened there, watching his father being murdered in front of him, and basically they have a night together. They're basically tied up by his grandmother's family, and they've pretty much said it from the get-go that in the morning time they're going to kill Tulip. And they do. And the moment in which I get very emotional about was Tulip looks at Jesse and says, they've got a gun pointed to her head, and she says, I don't even get to kiss him goodbye, and they shoot her in the head.
Yeah.
Now, spoiler alert, Tulip is resurrected in a fashion. I won't give too much away about how she's resurrected, but she is brought back to life. Jesse he somehow gains the will to stand against his family. I won't say what happens with the end of that, but they good things do happen to a degree. But these characters are put through hell and back. And like I said, some of the storylines you can sit there and be like, some of them are convoluted. You do get to meet, which is one of my favorite villains of all time because he's so absurd, is Herr Starr.
Yeah.
When you get to the later part of the series and the travesties of what happens to him, you can make the joke. I've made the joke before about the increasingly poor decisions of Theon Greyjoy. You could make the argument of the increasingly poor decisions of Herr Starr.
Yeah.
Would work within that joke as well because he keeps making these he thinks they're the right choices and they come back and bite him. But it's the heartfelt story to me. It really is about the story of Jesse growing as well.
Yeah.
He really has to learn. He has this, I was listening to the HMP guys are actually here in Movie Podcast. They're going to do a Preacher podcast that is that follows the TV series.
Sure.
And they talked about like Jesse's code of honor. Jesse's biggest weakness and his biggest strength is this code of honor that he has.
Yeah.
And another moment that I've posted, and if I get personal about it, it's about fatherhood, is that like something that Jesse's father tells him is that you have to be one of the good guys.
Right.
Because there's way too many of the bad.
Right.
And Jesse lives by this code. The problem is that code continually bites him on the ass because he's willing to try his best to look at the good in people.
Yeah.
And this especially plays into his relationship with Cassidy.
Sure.
And how that comes to bite him on back, in a negative way. And it's just so encompassing. Like I said, there are I don't think it's a perfect book by any stretch of the imagination. I think people need to realize that. Watchmen is probably the closest I think any comic book has come to being perfect because the way that it's written and that it's structured. That's neither here nor there. We'll talk about that in the future.
Probably.
and there are a lot of dated moments, but to me, this is the best. Like Strangers in Paradise, I have to make it's the journey of characters. And the way that the writers and the artists tell that story.
Right.
And I talk about like my third favorite comic book artist of all time pretty much is Steve Dillon.
Yeah.
And because I've from the minute I've read Preacher and anything he's done subsequent, his artwork is so distinct and it stands out. The artists I tend to love are people who their artwork I can pinpoint who it is. It's like Alex Ross.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can tell an Alex Ross painting, without any question, because it's like, oh, that's Alex Ross. There you go. And Steve Dillon's the same way.
Yeah.
If it wasn't superhero related, I would have, as an honorable mention, like him and Jason Aaron did a 22 issue run of the Punisher Max.
Okay, yeah.
Which I would recommend if you get a chance to pick up and read all 22 issues of it. It's that is in and of itself pretty beautiful, but it is still involving superheroes to some degree. And so I couldn't really put it on the list, but I think it's something that people should check out because it's some of Steve Dillon's best artwork besides Preacher. And it's really funny because you get to see him grow in Preacher as an artist. From the first volume to the later art, do you really see him grow? And I think that's something that I think a lot of people don't realize. I think it's really fun if you find a book that you love and you get to see the artist grow.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure.
As they're writing this story. But yeah, I mean, I love Preacher enough that I own action figures of both Jesse Custer and Cassidy. Cassidy's missing his arm as well, which is even ironic because it's like, he's a vampire.
Yeah,
that's my excuse for it.
It grows back eventually. So.
It'll grow back eventually. Mine just doesn't have his arm at the time. So, all right. Do you have any closing thoughts as we're talking about this out?
I just I always am impressed by how much any medium can do. Comic books is certainly one of those mediums that if people give it a chance, there's something in a comic book for pretty much anybody. It's just a matter of sometimes it's a matter of getting past the superheroes and saying, because if superheroes aren't your thing, I completely understand. There are other things other than superheroes.
And it's the idea that I think people need to remember is that comics are a medium.
Yes.
Superheroes are a genre,
right?
And there's plenty out there to really look at.
Yeah,
and really, if you look at the course of superhero books, it doesn't start until the late 50s to early 60s.
Yeah,
in the 50s, like they were like the popular comic books at the time were romances and westerns and like EC horror comic books. So it's really fascinating, and I think there's a lot you can gain. And if you look into, I hate to use the term indie. This is one of those times where I think indie is a good thing. It's not like indie rock, which can be a bad thing. But I think indie comic books are really where a lot of artists put their heart into it. And somebody can make the argument that, well, Vertigo, I had 2 Vertigo titles on my list, and Vertigo is, while it's run by DC Comics, Vertigo in the 90s, which are the 2 books that I put on my list come from, is that Vertigo in the 90s was taking chances left and right to where they're not doing that today. And it's actually kind of sad.
Yeah, that's
true. I don't think DC really knows what to do with Vertigo at the moment. And it's kind of sad because in the 90s...
Yeah, and Marvel's never gotten in that game.
Yeah, besides Preacher and besides Transmetropolitan, I mean, think about the book... We're talking about Sandman, Hellblazer, and there's a bunch of books that didn't even make our lists that we didn't talk about that are incredible that Vertigo was publishing. Karen Berger, the editor, basically the woman who formed Vertigo, the chances that she took on people is pretty astounding. And I think more people, it needs to be celebrated and it needs to be remembered as much of anything. So speaking of which, because... talk about the chances that Image has taken. It was recently announced, I think a couple weeks ago, that Karen Berger was coming back into the comic book field and working for Image Comics.
Oh, wow. Cool.
So there you go. We'll end it with that. Dwayne, where can we be reached
all right.
every day?
So a couple of places. Obviously, we would love if you would check out our website, watchreadlisten.net. Obviously, we have the show notes for the podcast episode, but we also have articles, and you're going to start seeing some more stuff on there, as well as my schedule is opening up with the summer coming up. We've got lots of stuff planned out. I'm not going to say anything specifically about it yet, but we do have some stuff coming up. And then you have, of course, Twitter, WRL Podcast, which is primarily me. I kind of run the Twitter and post
I haven't set
some
my phone up
things.
for it, so it's all the way.
And then facebook.com/watchreadlisten. Give us a podcast. Give us a like on there, and you can, we publish the episodes up there as well.
And you know what I would challenge anybody who listens to this episode, do us a favor.
Yeah.
Go to iTunes. You can download it to your computer.
Yeah.
I've done this for other podcasts. Go to your computer, download iTunes, give us a 5-star review, and just tell us why you like the podcast. That actually helps us out in terms of getting us out there, in terms of people seeing the podcast in those areas. Apparently iTunes, because
I'm one of those people who I don't use iTunes either.
I don't either, but I downloaded it so
I have it to.
I purely have iTunes to give good reviews to the podcasts that I love, and I've actually gone out there and done that, and you can do it for us. Yes. And then on the personal note, hopefully within about, I would say at the beginning of June, we're gonna be launching the All Booked Up podcast by my lovely partner in crime, Shu Koble, and she's got The Color of Magic is lined up for the first book they're going to discuss, and eventually they're going to do Alice in Wonderland the month after, and there's already talks about what they're going to do for the third month. It might involve a writer that we've talked about in the past. I'll let you guys guess about that. And then, that's pretty much it. Like, show us the support. I really would love some feedback. I was just going to ask for people if they wanted to talk about their own independent books, but I didn't think we'd get any. But hey, if you have... if you want to send us feedback, it's not like we can't read it on the next episode. So. If you have feedback for what you guys love about comic books, independent or superhero-wise, let us know. Yeah. Like, give us recommendations, too, because I think Dwayne and me made the best point. Marvel DC has not been doing anything really that interesting. If there's a book that maybe you could recommend to us, I would love to hear it. So, that's it. So, hey, thanks. We'll get June published out because I don't think we have any super plans yet.
Not yet.
June, but we'll figure something out and we'll let you guys know. So yeah, check us out.
All right, bye.
On the next show.
Thank you for visiting Watch Revisited. I did it!
Yay!